Yes, he does. Or at least that's the position half of the community has when asked whether or not the crying child or Charlie dies first. And I wanted to throw my hat in the ring about my final take on it, and given my presence in this community, I'm gonna assume this is gonna be a hot one. First, let's talk about the newest Tales book, because canon or not, Dittophobia answered some questions about FNAF 4. In the book, Rory was kidnapped as a 7-year-old and brought to the FNAF 4 house, thanks to the descriptions of the room. For 10 years, Rory had been suffering the nightmares of FNAF 4, which is caused by gas tanks leaking into the room. He manages to escape into Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals, but gets tricked into going back in and decides to stay thanks to a tape recording by William, which is automated in case it happens again. I discussed why I don't think this story is necessarily canon to the games, but the event and its ideas most certainly seem to be. As in Sister Location, we see gas cans and tubes going up scattered everywhere. An idea ID's Fantasy brought up is that the victims of this experiment could be responsible for the remnant that the scooper has in Sister Location. This then gets injected into Michael, which causes him to have the nightmares, a fusion of his experiences, such as the behaviors of the animatronics and the phone calls, and the experience of one of these kids, which is why we're in this room, the size of the player. The Steam flat out calls him a child. But what happened to this being the crying child? The encyclopedia states that we play as him. I'm going to not take other people's work, so make sure to check out the info tab, which shows videos explaining the inconsistencies within the encyclopedia. And the truth is, I think we were playing as the crying child in this game originally, because as many in the community believe, Dream Theory was most likely canon at the time. And I know I sound like a broken record, but the box change changed the story in order for everything to be real, including what these nightmares were. Hence the details in Sister Location, including the map, which showed they were connected. What does any of this have to do with William? If we assume Michael got these nightmares from the Remnant and not Crying Child, suddenly both Crying Child and Michael don't have to be in the experiment for Michael to have these nightmares, because I don't think it was created yet. In Sister Location, we can find a secret room which shows cameras, and only after entering 1983 does it open to show the experiment, the same year as Freddy's opening or the Bite of 83. But on the table we see a walkie-talkie sitting in the arms of a Fredbear plush, which many like to associate with the tapes Will was supposedly making in Dittophobia. But remember, those tapes were automated, and how are cassettes and a walkie-talkie associated? So then why is this stuff here? Basic environmental storytelling would tell you that the plush that the kid had with him 24/7 is now sitting on the desk with the walkie-talkie that was used to talk to him, along with the cameras for the experiment, almost as if his death is what inspired these experiments. After all, in the ending of FNAF 4, William speaks to the crying child telling him that he'll put him back together, which would explain a lot. But before you go typing away about how Charlie could actually be that plush, given she tries to help crying child during the events of FNAF World. But there's nothing tying Charlie to the plush. Every death in the series, excluding maybe some events in the books probably, we see every being attach itself to either what killed it or something it was stuffed inside. Why then would it make sense for the puppet to jump into his plushie? Especially with the popular theory of Midnight Motorist being the crying child finding Charlotte dead, which also wouldn't make sense given the plushie warns him to stay away from Fredbear, and springlock suits outside in the rain are a big no-no. And again, we have no motive to kill Charlie or anyone else to cause these events before crying child's death. Why does the killer of children need a motive? Because these experiments, the scooper, everything, they aren't constructions of a murderer, they're constructions of a scientist. Why else would he need Remnant and such without trying to bring the crying child back to life? Before you say he hated his children, you have to realize that William in the novels had already killed at that point in which he was neglecting Elizabeth. And we know that post Charlie's death, the purpose of everything was to create immortality. And yet during FNAF 6, we get this line.
What a deceptive calling. I knew it was a lie the moment I heard it, obviously, but it is intriguing nonetheless.
Not really the words of someone that plans on leaving, let alone being immortal. And something that rubs me wrong is to assume he kinda just killed Charlie and then developed a motivation to keep killing, rather than one event, not caused by Afton, being what caused Afton to snap from the very beginning. And my last point, that no one's probably going to agree with, is that William isn't some 2D killer. He has a name, he has a family, a successful business. He's a human being. And is it weird to assume he would start killing no different than how a real serial killer would? That being some sort of trauma that eats at them? Not to mention, most serial killers that do show signs of being evil from the start, for the lack of a better term, usually begin with something small, like an animal, not jumping straight to killing children. Plus, we have Henry, the story's stereotypical good guy, and yet if you actually think about it, excluding the murderer part, which even that's iffy, he's close to being as bad as William. He built the springlock suits, and yet both of them let them get worn, to the point where there had to have been an incident to cause the creation of the safe room. Despite this, they still kept using the suits afterwards. And instead of watching over his daughter, he acted just like William, except he didn't even watch his daughter on cameras just like William did. He just let a robot do it for him. He eventually went on to become the owner of all Fazbear property, including Circus Babies, which is weird because Funtime Chica is still a purchasable character during the events of FNAF 6, let alone if you believe Rockstar MCI like I do, because then we have Henry throwing all those souls into robots again. And lastly, the lefty suit, which electrocutes the puppet to keep it calm, nor give Michael any way out during the fire without actually consulting him first. Henry is not a good guy, but he's anti-Afton, and he fits that role perfectly. Why is all of that character development for someone we see show up in one game allowed, and yet the idea that William had a motivation to start killing isn't on the table? From a writing standpoint, why would Scott make a main antagonist as bland as to say he was just a crazy guy the whole time? Anyways, hopefully this video helps you understand why many don't think Charlie dies first, including myself. Make sure to let me know your thoughts down below. Maybe you have some adjustments or counter-arguments. If you feel like a comment section isn't long enough for your evidence, feel free to join my Discord, which is available through the card on the front page of my YouTube channel. I'll see you all in the next video, and remember, this was all just a theory. Matane. Being not so fatherly.